The importance of energy. This is a subject that I get quite excited about because through the many years of studying and working and training as a medium and many workshops, the one thing that I discovered is the absolute key and makes so much sense, and it is energy. Everything is energy. Every object, our body, everything we touch, we see is energy. Even what we see is energy. It's light patterns streaming through electrons to our brain that is interpreting this energy. It's an absolutely wonderful subject, and it is so vital to the understanding of this energy and how we work with the energies, because in mediumship and psychic development we use this energy, we tune into energies, we sense energies, we work with it. Everything relates to it. And one of the things that's very important is the understanding that what appears to be solid isn't. Because if you actually look into a scientific fact, if you were to draw the hydrogen atom and we have the nucleus and proton in the middle and you have the electrons spinning around the outside, if we were to expand that to the size of a cathedral, the centre is only the size of a 50p piece, and the electron whizzing about is a speck of dust. So if you were to take the fact that on the very minute and basic scale of what all life is a construction of these elements, there's not much in them, there's a lot of space. It has been calculated by a scientist that if you were to take all the space out of all the construction of the human body, and you took the entire population of the world, the actual physical substance would fit in the size of an apple. Often in spiritual teachings through many books, there's a discussion about Maya, that life is an illusion. And we have to remember that, relatively speaking, in the West, a lot of spiritual development is fairly new. But obviously in the East, it's been there for tens of thousands of years. There's a lot of sacred writings and things, so all that I'm discussing today is nothing new really. So Maya, everything is an illusion. And I often like the film The Matrix, where they say, if you couldn't wake from a dream, how would you know what was real? Because I, for one, sometimes have dreams that are so real you cannot tell the difference between being here and there, apart from when you wake up. So, energy is one of the vital things, because when we communicate or we expand, everything is an interaction of energy. When you work with your guide, you sense their energy, their vibration. Everything is a vibration and an energy. And it's the same working with spirit communications in mediumship. You work with somebody's energy, and these energies, they blend, and this is a technique you need to learn to work with when communicating either with your guide or working with spirit people. Their energies will come in. Now, it's fair to say that some people aren't always compatible with your energies, and you might not feel comfortable. Other ones you will, but it's an important factor to learn to sense this energy. And one of the important things I would like to state with you is to be aware of your own self. Now, this is vital. If you don't know your own energy, how are you going to recognize somebody else's energy coming in? So if I was to give you an example, if you were to sit at home right now, just quieten yourself down and be aware of yourself. Start at your feet or your head, work up your body. How are you feeling? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling tired? What is your energy levels within your body? Be aware of your own inner states. Be aware of the expansion of your own energy, and feel, cover the whole of your body, sense yourself. Before you do any work, it's important to get a datum point to start with. If you understand your own energy, you'll understand better when another energy comes in. And this is a very key important thing. When someone in spirit, obviously you don't see them physically, because you won't see them with physical eyes, because the light isn't refracting back off a physical object, because they are not physical. So what you need to do is, when you're aware of who you are and what's going on within you, as a spirit person or a guide draws near you, you will feel prickles or tingles, and often symptoms you'll get is a cobweb, and you'll get a rush of energy that comes up your back and over your head. This is often spirit, or you're sensing with your inner bodies, and that information relays from your inner bodies down into the etheric body, and it's this etheric body that then resonates the physical vibrations which goes into the brain. Now sometimes when we see clairvoyantly, we get impressions dropped on the neurocenters of the brain and we see an image, and this is another thing that guides typically do, or masters, to show you something. But we will cover this section later in the program. In this section we're going to cover energy and thought. This is a vital process to how we live our lives, because what people don't understand is that thought is energy. And we are creators of energy, and we manipulate energy, and how we think affects everything. And it also relates to communicating, stating intent. It all comes from thought. It generates and resonates an energy, a frequency. Now, one of the important things in our life is energy is also attracts, and this is where we get positive thoughts. As you resonate that positiveness, the universal law of like attracts like, positive things come in and positive things happen. There's lots of workshops and theories and books on positive thinking, but there's often, it's not covered as to why, but it is all to do with energy. Thought creates. And it comes down to meditation and visualization. When you visualize, you actually create something. So if you were to imagine a sea in the mental planes was where our thinking mainly happens, it's like we have a stream of interfaces between us all. We're very complex and detailed, far more complex than people understand or even take for granted even. So if we were to imagine a sea of ultimate energy, we polarize neutral energy. If there's an abundant sea of this neutral energy, if we think of a single thought, let's say it forms a little spark of light, and you keep thinking, and what you're doing is you're amplifying that little spark of light, and that energy grows and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually at the point where it becomes so big and very strong, if you think of this in terms of like a music amplitude of turning the volume up, it gets louder. The resonances of this energy then descends down into the emotional planes, which if you're sensitive you will feel in an emotional body. And it also is another reason why sometimes you might suddenly feel unsettled. There's an energy there and you don't know what it is or why it is. You might suddenly feel very happy or very sad, or all the mixture of emotions. And as this energy descends down, it comes down into the lower planes, and all matter forms around energy, and things happen due to this process of energy. So it's very important to keep positive about things. And really I ought to touch upon the subject of psychic protection, because a lot of people overly worry about psychic protection. It is a good idea to understand the principles of psychic protection, but a lot of it is to do with attitude of mind, healthy living, and a balanced, healthy mind, and saying no. And it's being in control, and this is the important thing, that we are in charge of our own pathway and destiny. We must say no. If you had an unpleasant spirit there, it's no. You sense that energy and you feel that energy. So we are creators of this energy, and if we were in this imaginary world again with this spark of light, if you keep negatively reinforcing, I'm useless, I can't do this, it generates an energy. And this is one of the common problems with spirit communications, psychic work, mediumship at work. If you state before you start, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, you're setting up a resonant energy of negativity. And the more you keep, I call it pinging, the more you keep pinging that spot and amplifying it, it grows and gets stronger. So a lot of it's to do with mind control, and we are creators of our own reality. If we were to go into higher levels and our soul levels, what we have around us is all created by our own wishes and desires. but that's quite a complex subject and we'll cover this at a much later date. Thought processes are the key to energy communications. We state our intent on what we want to do. If you were to go dowsing and you're looking for water, state in your mind, I'm looking for water. That's all that's needed, no more. If you state, I want to sense something at a distance, let's say in America or any other part of the world, state the intent. Again, this sets up an energy and a resonance. And another good thing that you can work with sometimes is building up the energy, positive thinking. Think some happy thoughts. This swells your energies up and those energies can then expand out. And the important thing to realise is that there is no limitations. People say it can't be done or this can't be done. Why put restrictions on it? If you truly understand how the inner worlds are and how they all connect, there is no restrictions. There are limitations obviously governed within physical laws and very much spiritual laws of what you can do and how developed you are. Now if you want to communicate with your guide, again it's state your intent. Send the thought out to them. I ask my guides to draw close with me at this time and work with me. You're sending that thought out. You talk to them in your mind. And the same thing with mediumship. If you want to actually work, again, there are visual exercises that I will cover later in this program, where you state the intent that you want to communicate with a spirit person. Again, it's all to do with stating intent. Now, one of the things I wanted to cover is difficulties that you may find with communication. And again, it comes down to energy. If you're feeling tired or if you're feeling drained or depressed or anything, you're not going to have a good communication. You're going to struggle. Now, my guide explained to me that they can come so far down, but we have to meet them. We have to go up to them. And if we're having a bad day, our energy is going to be quite low and we can't quite get up high enough. We might make that initial contact, but often you see when a medium is working, suddenly the communication is lost. And often this is the case, either they're not concentrating or that energy has dropped. And when that energy drops, the communication is broken. That's another technique to work on building the energy, but it's important to be aware of your energies. And if you feel that energy dropping, breathing in energy, breathe in the prana, take it in through the body, and even visualize yourself like a tank. Imagine that energy filling up and then work on it and expand out. But if you're going to do readings or anything along these lines, it's always work on a good day when you're feeling fine. If you're feeling low, down, or you've got the flu, I wouldn't even bother. I'd just leave it there. Now, the other thing that you find with communication, which is often misunderstood and overlooked, as I'm sitting here, if a spirit person is next to me, although you can't see them, they are as real and their intelligence and their communication abilities are the same as mine. Now, you have to bear in mind that we're all different personalities and we're all individual. If you have a little frail old lady in life that didn't speak very much and went about her own way, you're not going to have a dramatic energy from this lady. It's a subtle and soft energy. And another technique that's important to point at this point is if you are mentally focused and very strong-willed, you can drown out that energy. And you've got to be aware that if there is a subtle and soft energy there, you need to step out of yourself a little bit, become soft, be in tune, and let that little gentle energy come in. Because if you overpower that energy, that communication again won't happen. Another thing, of course, is the person in the spirit world do not necessarily know techniques as a medium does of communicating. It works both ways. Those that are strong communicators have some idea of what's going on and how to communicate, and those are the ones that you get a strong link. Now, if you had somebody that was dynamic and powerful, often again it's sensing energies When you have a male energy coming in, you feel a strength, maybe a confidence even, a vibrancy to it, and a lady's is more subtle. And I think everybody that I've worked with in students on sensing energies, what we do is we put a chair with a person in and we blindfold them, and then a mixture of ladies and men in the room quietly shuffle around and stand behind that person. I've pretty much known it that in nearly all cases somebody knows it's a lady or a man. And this is always a good starting point to work with sensing the energy, whether it's male or female. But the other thing is that throws the spanner in the works is not everybody's human. There are other beings in the inner worlds that are not human form. Obviously, naturally, we have animals, but we have etheric beings that have never been to the earth, and you have nature spirits. Now, when you sense them, they don't tend to feel masculine or feminine. But again, this is something else that can be covered in a later workshop. So back to communication difficulties. If the person on the other side, sometimes if they're in a higher plane, they descend down into the lower planes to try and make that connection, that energy link with us. It disorientates them. It can make them a little bit confused. If they're used to living in one energy and have to descend down, the heavier vibrations do cause confusion. And often people say, well, why have they not given the name right, or why can't they give their shoe size or telephone number? Yes, in a good communication, all these things are possible, but frequently this is not the case. You find it can be a little bit vague and confused. But again, this comes down to your own development, and it's a good idea to work with the spirit person and encourage them or ask them questions even. But an important fact when you're doing this is not to rush them, because if you ask them what their age is, then don't fire another question quickly. Let them answer, let them speak. The best communication methods, of course, are trance, where you let them speak through you. This is relatively new in the trance world at the moment and is being experimented with. Typically in trance we usually have guides channeling through, but again this is something a little bit more advanced on the subject. So communication problems and knowing what to do with them. Check your own energies first. Make sure that you are fine and you're connected and there's a positive vibration. And another thing, the one important thing that I found is patience. Be patient. Sometimes if you state that intent, it's not instant. You have to build that energy up, the blending of energy of the spirit person. You get a feel from them. If you're clairvoyant, you may see them, and we'll work from those levels. So lots of things to remember, but we will work through them. In this section we're going to discuss guides. This has got to be one of the most misunderstood and a lot of speculation about what is and what isn't a guide. Now if we start with common misconceptions, somebody says that my Auntie Mabel is my guide or my Uncle Albert is my guide. This isn't true. A spirit guide is somebody that's very spiritually evolved and very advanced, and in some cases bordering on a master or are a master. Speaking with my guides personally, they've explained to me that they attend what would be like a university, a college, and there are levels of understanding, and one of the things they have to understand is the rules of the game. Certain things they're allowed to impress upon you, certain things they're not. Information that would maybe sway you off the path, so they have to be wise, and guides are very wise. The other thing that a guide is, they have unconditional love. They're non-judgmental no matter what you do. People often fret and think, oh, I've done wrong and my guide won't want to know me now. It's totally not the case. In most cases, if not all cases, a guide is with you before you're even born. So they spend a lifelong path, and in many cases, many incarnations. I know for a fact that some of my guides I've actually spent time with in past lives, going back quite a long time. So I know that there's that bond, there's an affinity. I know that one was a father to me. another one that was a brother in a society that I was in. So there is this connection that goes back a long way. So a guide is not your uncle or your auntie. These are technically termed a helper. So why is a guide often a Native American or a Chinese or a monk? The reasons for this is they show themselves that is spiritually representational of their pathway in the past. Their true form may not necessarily look like this. In fact, you find as you go into the higher mental planes, certainly the last three and into the soul planes, we don't hold form anymore. We become more energy, a sphere of light, of consciousness. So form is only to deal with things of the earth and manipulating matter. I mean, as we are in the earth, we have to pick things up, hold things. So there is a reason for that. But certainly when we evolve up into those higher levels, it's no longer needed, because we are consciousness and we are energy. And originally we are a flame, a divine light with spark from this solar force. So a guide would attend these schools and be well trained and know what to do. They don't always sit with you and watch all the time, but your main guide typically is always there when needed. But we have to remember that the relationship that you build with your guide is a relationship, and it's a mutual relationship of respect and one of love. Many people misunderstand that a guide is there to protect them and to save them from many things. This again, they will step if they can, but we have to remember ultimately the responsibility is always down to you, for your own thoughts, for your own actions, for your own choices. Many people seem to be very hung up on and very upset that they can't communicate with their guide. They don't know who their guide is. In most cases it isn't really necessary. They work quietly and subtly in the background. They prompt you, they will steer you into places to meet people or directions, or sometimes on the path when you feel confused and you don't know where you're going, they will encourage and bring in beautiful loving energies, and you have guides for different purposes. Now often you have more than one guide and certainly numerous helpers. To think that you walk alone, we're not. We're never alone. We have our guardian angel to start with. The body of the guardian angel ensouls all of the lower parts of us anyway. So we are in this protective bubble, you could call it, which I think is quite a lovely idea and thought, that we have such a master, a being of such love that's protecting and surrounding us. Now obviously communicating with higher forces, you need to develop and advance to that level of understanding and reach those levels of vibration. So back to a guide. A guide, they will show themselves as a Native American. This is maybe one pathway, but it's certainly not all. And you could liken it to a wardrobe, if they could pull out a different garment to show themselves in. And you could get this where you might see a Chinese guide and a North American, but in reality they could be the same person. They're just showing themselves in a different aspect. Along our pathway, of course, we're always challenged and many difficulties in life. That is what life is. If we had no challenges, no difficulties, nothing to aspire to, there would simply be no purpose in being here. The earth is no more than a college and a school, and we learn and we develop. Now a guide may have a particular aspect. Let's say you're into painting. You may have a guide that was into painting. It may be music. Each guide can have different qualities. The same as we do. We go through life, we learn different skills. If there's something in your path, a particular, something that you need to learn, you're working on, somebody can come in. They could be a guide, a helper. And also you bear in mind that when we go to helpers, family do come and help where they can. But we have to remember that Auntie Mabel or an auntie or uncle or even a parent, they haven't been trained, and just because you enter the spirit world does not make you wise. A person here today and tomorrow is exactly the same. They have to learn and progress and develop. And it takes many years because you cannot take this knowledge in one go. You just can't digest it. You have to process it. And one of the important things is understanding in your heart of what you're reading and understanding. It's one thing to read it and have it in the mind. It's another thing to truly understand and resonate with what your understanding is. Family members. You may have a family member that may have been, say, unsavoury, and they may have an opinion or a view. If they were to impose that opinion or view on you, it wouldn't be good, and this is where your guide would filter that out or would stand them aside and say, well, actually this isn't appropriate on this occasion, and would take charge of things. Now often a guide will impress you. It's usually a mind-to-mind link. On the higher levels, when you're more evolved, a guide will work a guide is typically on the mental planes, the higher up. They've evolved away from the emotionalism, the being upset. They're detached. They've become masters of their own being. So they will work on the higher mental body and impress, and that will descend down into the emotional body, and through the emotional chakra, which links to the heart chakra in the body, and through the etheric body, you will receive impressions or ideas. It'll come from nowhere, and it might even come in a dream. And it's a good thing to keep a dream diary. Dreams are often very confusing because they're symbolic. Now, the universal language of all spirit is symbolism. There isn't really a book you can buy that has a universal understanding of symbolism. Each is individual to the person. You have to intuitively feel what it is saying to you. Now when you advance along the path and you do make connection with your guide, you can ask your guide, and willingly they will share with you and explain to you, and it is a great advantage. But so many of the students that I teach have a great anxiety and emotionalism towards their non-connection to their guide, or they can't see their guide, or they can't feel their guide. It isn't essential to see them or to feel them. And again, to communicate with them. It is an advantage, but it isn't essential, because you will receive guidance of what you need. Now typically a guide would stand next to you, and often, as I've been here today, I can feel their presences. Now again, a lot of people talk about development, but this is the important part. Learning to develop spirituality. What is spirituality? It isn't about religion, it isn't about belief, and it's about kindness, taking a view of non-harm, looking after things, learning not to be selfish, to be patient. Many qualities, and there is many thousands of books on the subject. But ultimately, when you take charge and take control, the outer, denser layers fall away. Each layer drops away. The dross, the negativity falls away. And as each layer drops, that inner light and those inner parts of you expand out. Your whole structures in the atomic and the electron cycle within the inner planes, and we're not talking so much about the physical world in science, we're talking about the spiritual side. And as those come up, those vibrations, you can resonate more clearly with your guide. And as I explained earlier, we have a piano on a keyboard. To say go up 4 octaves, you've got to go up quite a way. I remember once that I was getting frustrated, I couldn't make a connection with my guide. And he showed me a picture and a view of like a tower block. And he said, imagine I'm on the top floor and you're on the bottom. Trying to communicate to you, you can't quite hear what's being said. So the only way to do this is to actually go up the steps and go a bit closer. They can descend down so far, and you have to remember this, that they can't come down. And often, if you're experiencing sadness, depression or other things, it's almost impossible to connect or communicate. You envelop yourself in like a dark smog and a cloud. It's very difficult. And if you've ever been in that situation, you will notice that your mind is churning away, reinforcing lots of negative statements. And again, your mind is so active, it's very difficult to actually bring that connection and communication in. Now obviously a good thing to do at this time would be to meditate, it releases the tension in the mind, and in that quietness you will receive healing, because we have healing guides as well. There are many aspects. It's a very complex and deep subject, but the one thing you must understand is they do what is best for you. They know better, they know your pathway, and in some cases they have an overview of what's ahead. And again, a responsibility of a wise guide is to describe to you little snippets, maybe little bits of hope, but not give you too much. An example would be if a guide said to you that something unpleasant was going to happen. In most cases people would avoid going through that. But the understanding from a spiritual point of view is we need certain lessons and experiences, and sometimes failing at something is a valuable lesson. Teaches you not to be overconfident maybe and too arrogant, so it brings about an inner balance, and everything is about balance. And this is encouraging, and this is what your guide is doing, is trying to steer you along the pathway of evolving. And the other thing is avoiding karma. Karma is a very deep and complex subject, and sometimes a bit unpleasant, so I don't want to go too much into it, but pretty much the rule that what you send out bounces back. You polarize an energy with negativity. That energy at some point in the universe has to be rebalanced, neutralized, or positive, because things in the universe always have to be balanced, and this is where the karmic law comes in. So I'm not going to cover that in too much detail, but this is going to be the end of this part with the guides, and we'll go further on a later section. Welcome to this section. I'm sure this is a section that many of you will look forward to, and that is a practical of connecting with your guide. Now, it's one of those things that you have to be patient with. It's not something that may spring, and it all depends on your development, whether you're at the beginner or whether you're an advanced person. Now, in a moment I will cover meditation in detail for those that aren't aware of meditation techniques. But for now, to communicate with your guide, if you remember we said about stating intent, sending that thought out. Again, you may not know who, whether it be male, female, it doesn't matter. So if you sit yourself comfortable, and always a good practice is to take some deep breaths, at least 3, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And a good technique is always to say with each one, I let go of tension. Make sure that the muscles in your body are relaxed, your jaw muscles. And as you breathe in and breathe out again, let go of mental tension and state, I let go. This is a good technique. Now, put your hands gently on your lap, spine roughly straight. It doesn't have to be forced. We're not doing yoga here. Now, bearing in mind that everything is energy and mental energy, it is important to have your body in a good posture, but it isn't essential to be holding your fingers in certain angles and directions and crossing your legs and things. So, as you sit and you close your eyes and you breathe, you are slowing down your mental thoughts and your processes. Now, the important thing is to remember, a lot of people say, I can't do it because my mind won't empty. You don't need your mind to empty. You just need to focus on something specific. And always a good thing I find is imagining like a sunset, or you're by the seaside, anything that has a positive resonance with you. So as you sit there and you send a mental thought out, would you please come and sit with me and draw close? Now, what would you expect to happen? Now, again, all depends on your sensitivity of how much you will sense. Obviously, the more advanced you are, the more you will sense. Typically, I have found that a guide, respectfully, is usually behind you. I know for a fact that one guide typically is on my right shoulder or right side of me, and one typically on the left. Now, some guides use what are called doorbells, or a little notification that it's them. And I know that one of my guides actually tickles my left ear, so I know who that one is. And I feel a tingling on the right side of my head, which is the other guide. Now these two guides I've worked with closely, and you can do this each time. Say, get to know one at a time, get that same person. Again, you may not know their name, but as you work in this, the impression will come to you. And this is where you start making development. Now, as I stated earlier, most of us have an innate ability to sense masculine and feminine. So you get a good starting point, whether it's a female guide or a male guide. A lot of people I find are very wishful thinking, and ladies as well, they want it to be a lady guide and all the rest of it. In most cases it isn't. It doesn't mean they can't. But in the true spiritual form, what I was discussing earlier, in the higher realms, when we go into the higher mental planes, when we become that energy, we're both. We're male and female. We can all show a mother's side, a father's side, all aspects. Imagine a diamond. We are little aspects of everything. We're far greater and far bigger than people understand. And our abilities far stretch beyond what people even think about. So, you've relaxed yourself, you've stated, you've breathed, and you've now asked your guide to pull forward. Now, typically symptoms that you will get is prickling around the head, which I have at the moment because I can feel my guide behind me. So your little tingles, little prickles, you'll feel like your hair's being touched or brushed, or you might feel your ear touched. And what I sometimes amusingly call psychic fleas. This is part of an earlier stage where energies are shifting around the bodies and you suddenly get an itch, or there's an itch, and you can spend ages scratching around and not getting comfortable and getting quite frustrated. What I would say to you is just go with it. Don't let it frustrate you. Let the itches pass. As you move on and you develop, this will stop in time. So don't be overly worried about this. Now, as you evolve in, you will feel your guides coming in strongly, where they blend very carefully with you. You will feel that energy, and it's important to what I said earlier. Be aware of what is your signature, so you know how you feel emotionally, physically, your energy, whether you're low or high. You've got a point of reference. So when your guide draws in, pulls in close, you will feel that rush of energy, and it will go down your legs, it'll come up your back. And if they come in sometimes a bit quick or very powerfully, it can be likened to having a bucket of cold water thrown over you. And often the phrase when somebody says that it's like somebody stepping on your grave. When someone comes that close into your aura and the energies intermingle, this is what's happening. Your energy and their energy is intermingling. And that energy sets up resonances and all kinds of strange effects. And it is this that actually gives these tingles and feelings. Now, another common one is cobwebs. You feel like something touching your face, or you're feeling sticky and things. This is spirit. Again, it's energy. It's the energy that's resonating. It's changing your own energy. You are energy. So something of another energy. If you had two magnets and you bring them into play, there is all kinds of things going on there. Don't be put off or frightened by any of these changes. Sometimes they can be pretty strong. And one of the things that will happen at some point as you keep practicing develop, it will hit an emotional level, and you'll feel very emotional and tearful, and you won't know why you're sobbing. This is all normal, and it isn't anything to worry about. Eventually in time that will pass, and there'll be other stages. And ultimately, when the guide steps in, sometimes when they draw very close, we go into what's called a trance state, or a light trance state. They come in almost to the front of your body, and specifically if your energies are strong enough, the guide will maybe push you along the path of trance where they can work with you. Now, a light trance, sometimes called overshadowing. Now, this is excellent to work with because it means that your mind is still active and you can work with it, but your guide is putting words into your mouth or impressing you or images. And again, this also works well in mediumship. Sometimes if a spirit communicator has a message and is struggling, your guide can step in and relay this information. Quite often this bond and relationship you have with your guide, there is a mind-to-mind link, which of course we commonly term as telepathy. In the spirit worlds, it is just a common form of communication because as I'm talking, there are sound waves. In the spirit world, there is simply no need for it, so you use mind. And often in the astral projection worlds, there's something called a rote, which is like a ball of energy. Within this ball of energy is visuals, audio and emotional content, which is fantastic. So all of a sudden, in a fraction of a second, you can understand something and be instant. And when you start meditating, the need for reading books and things, there's always that need, but there does come a point that you start accelerating and this information is dropped, and this energy you suddenly interpret as a visual experience, a physical experience, everything. It contains the whole works. Now, Robert Monroe often discussed them as rotes and these energy balls. We can do this too. We can send a thought, an emotion and an impression to another person. And if they were receptive enough, they would actually be able to receive this and interpret it. So, back to working with your guide. Typically, don't expect to hear a physical voice because again, your guide isn't physical. So what you will hear is mental thoughts. And often you will have, it's only my imagination or other things. Imagination is the key. It's the one thing that sets up things in resonances. If you see a picture or you generate a picture, it starts the ball rolling. So please don't be worried about it just being your imagination. But it's worth pointing out common sense. If you receive information praising you that you're the next saviour of the world, dismiss it. It's very unlikely that this is true, and we have to bear in mind that sometimes you have spirits that come in that don't have good intent, that will try and manipulate or steer you in the wrong direction. And someone would say, well, how on the earth do you know? And this is when you work from the heart centre. Don't work from the mind, work from the heart. Sense in the heart. If it feels good and if it feels true, go with that instinct. Don't be swayed by what is said. And certainly, I wouldn't advise anybody to take action based on what they're told. If you were told, go for this job or leave your job or do something else, you have to remember it is your path, your life. And it's so important that you don't start communicating using tables, Ouija boards, and taking action based on this information. Everything's down to you. You have to remember it is your responsibility. So, take some common sense with that. Listen to what your guide says. Typically, a guide will be concerned with your spiritual development, your unfoldment. They'll advise you to meditate or techniques, or if there's a problem, they may say to you, don't let it bother you, don't let it worry you. They might be reassuring or just say, it is a difficult time, but sometimes difficult times make us strong, and when we're in the face of other things, we've been through that experience. And one of the beautiful things about life and its many experiences, if someone comes along and is suffering and experiences the same as you can resonate with that experience. You can share with them and help them. What more beautiful thing could you possibly do than to help somebody else along the path? So you are effectively becoming a guide on the earth plane for them. Guide is a beautiful person, splendour and love. And when they come in, if you can feel this, it always feels a great love, like two big arms enfolding you and protecting you. And when you're in that energy, you feel safe, nothing touches you, you don't feel worried. So, don't be frustrated by not connecting with your guide. I've seen my own guides briefly, and I wouldn't say I've had a very clear view of them. I know I can see them and I sense their energies, their ways, their mannerisms and how they talk. I have seen them occasionally, but there isn't a need to see them. like a photograph. I know what they look like, and a lot of people again get hung up on this subject. They have to see them, they have to know their name. Well, in most cases their names are unpronounceable anyway. So whatever you call them, if you're happy with it, it isn't important to them. What is important that you're happy with that name. So again, don't get hung up on names and being technically accurate. It isn't important in the higher realms. So what would you expect from your guide? Love, understanding, somebody that doesn't judge at all, and somebody that actually has a little window on your life. And in one case I had a reading with a well-known medium, and the information that was given to me was stunning, down to the very smallest details, and it really showed to me just how much they are involved and pay attention in your life. So it is important, but remember they always work in the background. Sometimes different guide steps in, but I certainly know that with my guides, there's a few of them, there's usually a spokesperson that speaks on behalf of the others or works. And I know that if I'm doing some platform work or mediumship, different guide will work. If I'm going to do some trance or speaking, another guide will come in close and overshadow. So it's a very deep and complex subject, working with guides, but we can certainly cover this a bit more later. So keep working at it. I would say typically you've got to expect realistically to meditate and work with your guide as a good practice every night, and I would say a good 2-3 months, maybe even 6 months. It's not going to happen instantly, it's not going to happen overnight. A lot depends on your spiritual development, how you progress as a person, how you perceive what you perceive. And another good thing is always helpful is to send mental feedback. Say, I'm sensing you on my right, left, or I'm seeing an apple, a church, a bell. So when they drop these images onto you, they know it's working. I mean, they're not in your mind reading, so it's always a good thing to remember when you're trying to develop and work with them. Say, okay, this is what I'm receiving. You've given me the name. My guide's name is Tumani. So I would say, okay, I heard the word Tumani. Is that right? And this is an important step, energy sensing, because often when you're right, they come rushing in. There's like a little buzz and a twinkle, and like little stars almost flick around you. You really feel that, wow, you know, so it's like a positive yes. And again, it's working from the heart center. If you're asking questions and things don't sound right, they're not. Trust your instincts, work from the heart. If you have a sad, hollow feel and it goes down, that's a no, or just don't go there. So feel for that enlightened feel, that energy, that little buzz and the tweak. And as you develop on this, you will get to the point and respectfully say to your guide, would you show yourself to me? Again, this depends on your clairvoyant ability or whether you can see, but you have to remember, you can see without seeing. It sounds odd, but you can see by sensing, you can feel. So if your guide was to come in and was big and muscular, you would take on that energy, you would feel that. If they were small and delicate and fragile, again you would feel. So you get a sense of who they are and their mannerisms and how they are, softly spoken or slow. And the one thing that I always look for is words that I wouldn't use, that they use. Again, it's worth keeping a little checkpoint, because there are times when we have to be very careful not to put our wishes and wants. And this comes down to what happens in many psychic readings. People are so desperate for something to happen, they resonate this energy out. And if you're so desperate to hear something, or you want a promotion and it's going to happen, you could literally bounce that off a wall and hear that back. Yes, you're going to get that promotion. It has no basis on truth whatsoever. So it's something you have to be very careful of. Of all things, have fun, keep practicing. A lot of people or students that I teach, they've done it 4 or 5 times in a week and said, I didn't get anything, I didn't sense anything. you're not going to do it overnight. It takes many years, and typically for good mediumship training you're looking 10 years. That's a long time. Unfortunately, many people want it now. They want it instantly. The spiritual path is a long path. And one of the things you must remember, it's the journey that's important, not the goal.